way, because definitely, how could I have an IT trends webinar without mentioning AI? That'd be
Yeah,
foolish.
yeah,
Although,
it's kind of tough these days to dodge around it. Although apparently ChatGPT was down earlier today.
well, it's a good day to use Copilot, I guess. But no, it's funny is that, I guess, speaking quickly, where I've seen the most AI, like, wow, this really does something for you and is a monster time saver, has been the anything you have to do with programming.
Mm,
Anytime you
I
have some scripting thing for, like, hey, write a script that does the following, it that seems to be where it excels. And the irony is definitely not lost of people programming themselves out of a job. So,
I'm sure like once you start making it try to do more complicated things or like stitching things together, like you somehow see like ran up against the character limit or whatever. That's where the real like rubber meets the road.
well, awesome. We'll go ahead and get started here. Well,
Mm.
welcome everyone. This month's webinar is 2025 IT trends to watch. So I figured here at the beginning of the year, fresh off of New Year's resolutions, figured it would be fun to play with the crystal ball and see what might be coming up here in 2025. And then something that's nice too is by recording it, we can take a look at these clips a year from now and see which ones we got right and which ones we were way off base and which ones were really big and we completely missed. So the nice part about recording things is being able to go to the tape a year from now and see how we did. So let's go ahead and peer into the crystal ball. Forecasting is always fun. And like I mentioned, recording this allows us to check the score. And then also too, I'm going to keep this focused to just small business rather than like large IT enterprise where, there might be some stuff about SD-WAN and edge computing and quantum computing. I don't think those things really affect SMBs. So I'm going to keep this focused to our target market of the small and medium-sized businesses and what they might bump into more often than not. All right, so here are my top 5. You're going to get a new breed of security tool that emerges for web browsers. I think that a lot. You're also going to keep seeing this was a gimme. I gotta get one right, right? Major breaches are still going to happen. You due to the usual suspects. And there's my safe bet for a prediction, right?
Yeah, you gotta
Um,
have that gimme.
yeah, everybody's got to get at least one right. And then the march of AI carries on. That's another. Be remiss if I didn't mention it. One that's a little, some people might not really talk about too much is, the first major wave of IT professional retirements. I think we're about to see a big turnover in on how the industry shakes out. And then kind of related to that is the managed service provider consolidations hit new highs. So the companies that are helping out SMBs are gonna start conglomerating. One thing I will mention that you'll notice is conspicuously missing, which might have been something maybe if I did this in 2024, 2023, is there's no mention of cryptocurrency. So just kind of goes to show not real that's an interesting one and not really, again, keeping it focused to SMBs. So let's dive into that first one, securing the browser. So this is one that's a little technical on the way of how I'm seeing most of how security is working for a lot of people's endpoints. And I'll say that, the answer to securing somebody's endpoint is pretty well solved, all things considered. You've got most people have threat protection, some type of higher level system that can a kill and quarantine the end, the file that attempts to run on the endpoint, or do a breach detection that says, hey, there's these scheduled tasks within the operating system. And over again, all the behavior is within the operating system, within the operating system, within the operating system. But the browser is where things get really interesting because really, if you think about it, well over 85% of the work that people actually do is in a web browser. Yeah, sure, there's email, but even to that point, some people are just accessing email from a web browser. That's what I do. I don't use Outlook anymore. And if all the work we're doing is in the browser, and these browsers have all the good stuff, sensitive information, the passwords, client information, all the recordings, banking stuff, that's really kind of the final frontier for being able to secure it. And what's going on in the browser isn't really looked at by, an antivirus or a threat protection platform. So, again, you've got everything locked down for, hey, application control. Adobe can't open command prompt. Excel can't open PowerShell. Or, hey, if a suspicious file run, kill and quarantine it. Or secure access service edge that says, hey, there's a VPN for what connection tunnel you've got going somewhere. Yeah, I mean, effectively, endpoints are pretty well secured. I think that's with the right tools in place, you're pretty much good to go. But web browsers act like mini operating systems. And if Chrome has its own task manager, you can go in and kill certain processes within Chrome for crying out loud. And I'm not really seeing anything that's really making sure that that's locked down. A great example is one of our programs for application control looks at Chrome extensions and then we'll say whether specific Chrome extensions are acceptable. But that's being done at an application level. And if there's a Chrome extension that's completely legitimate, but it could be, there's tons of extensions that get added to a browser, right? You've got Honey for coupons. There might be password managers. I've seen a bunch of like package trackers, or there are some other companies that release their own, extension for Chrome or something like that. They usually go in, they're usually a totally innocent JavaScript file, and they can manipulate a lot of data, and Chrome doesn't exactly come out of the box locking that down. So I would make a prediction that, we're either going to look to see Microsoft releasing something in the Microsoft 365 suite for securing Edge, that for users that have Business Premium, that there'll be some type of browser credential guard or some type of browser guard that is locking down specifically Edge. And then there might be somebody who comes to market for things like Chrome and Firefox. I mean, Edge is really Chrome under the hood. It's all Chromium, but Microsoft doesn't really want to play too nice with its competitors. So for securing the browsers, what's the impact on SMBs? So if you do that, it reduces the risk of phishing and malware attacks, things where you're in your webmail, you click on a link, it steals an access token, something that prevents that action from something being able to steal something that bypasses MFA. Maybe the secure system has easier adoption of secure login methods that say, hey, a biometric on, maybe something kicks to your phone that says a fingerprint for when you're trying to log in, and the rise of passkeys. I think a lot of big companies are already trying to push passkeys. Google has done it. Intuit is already pushing for it if you log into QuickBooks Online. So I would not be surprised if you see something that starts to combine passkeys, some active protection pieces, and the password manager all into one kind of secure gateway to the internet. And then I think, honestly, for a lot of people, it's just you're going to have better confidence in the privacy and data regs. But before we get that tool, what you can do now is, keep your browsers updated, keep patching Chrome. If Firefox releases an update, fire those off at the end of the day. For any programs that are offering passkeys, go for it. It makes it so that that's only set up for when you're logging in from the machine that you have. So I know Intuit for QuickBooks, again, does that. Definitely adopt it. And, even for a personal Gmail account, that's a good one. And then, education is always a great problem solver of, training staff to recognize browser warnings. Chrome is not going to give you a sudden flashy page that says you need to update your browser now. That's malicious. Don't click the random Chrome update browser piece. Ask your IT professional. That's 100%. All right. So that's what I've got for securing the browser. Number 2 is the gimme. Major breaches. They're going to keep happening. This isn't slowing down. Crime pays way too much for ransomware. So do the different records. It's very difficult to get caught. The only people who are going to get you is the FBI, and there's just too many of them for the FBI to get them all. The FBI goes for the big dogs. So small businesses might think that you are too small to be targeted. Who wants my garbage data? But typically you have lower defenses, and they know that you care about your information, and that if you don't have your info, you're willing to pay to get back to work. I've heard so many business owners say something about, well, if it all just goes away, I'll just start over again. And that requires a certain degree of fortitude. And I don't mean to kind of bring in too much of recent events, but how many people in California and the LA area do you think are saying that right now? That something terrible happened to their home, it's just stuff, and they could just start again. I mean, it's when something comes through and wipes you out, it is more than just stuff. And then especially too, if you're handling something sensitive or any type of regulated information, even for just employees like social security numbers, you've got all those fun payroll reports that your workers' comp insurance asks for. you have to protect those to a certain degree. So it could be, could be legal consequences, but smaller ones happen. They just don't get reported as much. And that's especially because IT infrastructure is still woefully underprotected. There's still people I still bump into clients every day that they're using legacy email systems and they're using McAfee antivirus and, oh, we don't need that. What's the worst that could happen? There's also too the usual suspects, compromised credentials happens all the time. People haven't changed the password for 20 years. It's been breached through no fault of their own. Hey, they use the password at Adobe or their Adobe subscription, and Adobe was breached not too many years ago. And even though it was breached 3, 4 years ago, they keep using the same password. And so, kind of thinking to those low hanging fruit, weaker defenses, people just kind of do a drive by, for lack of a better term. They try the door handle on the car and it turns out it's unlocked. So, same deal. And until passkeys and that whole browser thing comes along, passwords are still going to be the main cause of the pain. A set of credentials gets compromised, multi-factor's not turned in for something, somebody's able to log in as someone, or, hey, they have MFA enabled, but it turns out the access token was stolen because the provider of the MFA, used it, kind of that balance of convenience kind of screwed things up a little bit. All right, so what does this mean for SMBs? While hey, an actual attack happening on the endpoint, weaker defenses, I think SMBs will definitely be targeted by a lot of the spray and praise, and just making it difficult enough for attackers to go on to the next one will be a big one. But watch for supply chain attacks, where a lot of hey, this person has access to a lot of people and they're upstream of all these other people. If we breach them, it's a bigger payday. So, hey, a little bit more effort, bigger payday. Kind of think of it of, even for a business being like, do I want a lot of clients that just have, 4 or 5 people that have a contract value of X? Or do I put in 30% more work and I get somebody that has access to 1,000 people and I get paid 50 times X? Becomes a business decision for the criminal at the end of the day. The financial and reputational damage for breaches continues. And government might start stepping in to say, hey, there's active compliance standards. It's no longer that, hey, you're going to meet this. It's now we're sending people out to make sure that you meet this. So what can you do now? Defense in depth, layered security, firewall at the network edge, threat protections to make sure those endpoints are good, and MFA everywhere you can turn it off. Again, it's just make it difficult for them to go on to the next person. We're not asking people to be Fort Knox, but hey, and treat stuff seriously. Vet your vendors. This is a big one. And I mean, even if it's just another small business, if there's something they do that doesn't sit right with you, raise your hand. A great example is I've bumped into third-party bookkeepers that use a Comcast.net email address, and there's no way that they have email security turned on. There's no way that, and this is somebody who's remoting into a computer and touching financial data, the stuff that cares the most. And I mean, if somebody who's been doing it for 20 years and is using books by Janie at Comcast.net, do you really think they've rotated their password every 90 days and have multi-factor turned on? Probably not. And they're touching the most sensitive thing. So vet the vendors. I mean, you don't have to do a whole full, hey, I want to see SOC 2 compliance, but just something doesn't smell right, speak up. And then also to have the incident response plan. If something happens, be ready to, all right, this is the page of the book. I'm going to call this person. I'm going to call this person. I'm going to call this person. That might just be it. It might be I call the IT person to contain the breach. I call my attorney to figure out what the scope of my liability is. And then I call the insurance company to give me a bunch of cash to clean this up. So this was the easy one. And then for the next easy one, the AI buzz continues. It's here to stay. Genie's out of the bottle. Tons of questions around this. And again, I'm staying focused on SMB. I'm not going to make any talks about, hey, is it, is government going to step in and regulate it in some way, shape, or form? Are we going to see, the singularity, Skynet going to come? Any of that stuff? I'm thinking of this more on the level of, hey, for tools that people use every day, kind of the way that the smartphone and the ability to Google search really transform our way of working with information. How is AI going to do that? And to be perfectly honest, AI might not replace a job, but for those who understand how to use the tool, it will give them an incredible efficiency boosts. Thinking of it similar to the last great tech revolution of, the Google search, you're looking at somebody who needs to be able to find information quickly to be able to make a determination is, who can Google fast to find the best deal for, a travel agency thing for putting together a package versus the person who didn't use the internet and would pick up the phone and have to call 15 resorts and ask them for this. The speed and the type of information that person can get will be a lot faster. But also, too, the key part is, hey, when you're Googling and in those early days, how good was the information available in that training data? And obviously, as time went on, it became completely ubiquitous. So easy prediction is, AI is going to pop up on every platform. I mean, as Delta is going to have an AI booking agent, your bank will have some type of AI customer service for Bank of America or any of the big boys, and it's just, it's going to be there. It's kind of, some people are looking at it for just replacing a lot of frontline staff, but I don't think that will truly come too far too fast. I think, again, it's going to be an augmentation to current staff who understand how to use the tool. And then I will dip briefly into the enterprise piece for a prediction that lack of training data, they're already complaining about it. And sure, there's all the things about it, building data centers fast enough power or whatever. But the lack of training data is infrastructure or organizational deficiencies. The data is out there. So much of the stuff is there. It's just how it's organized and what's available to it. I mean, sure, you could have all the stuff about your company between your email and your OneDrive and all this different stuff in your computer, but it's still not actually hooked up that it's reviewable. I mean, the same thing is, think of an intern comes in and you show them your computer and you're going through a bunch of stuff and they go, all right, I think I get it. And then they go, oh, and by the way, there's this whole other website. And they're like, what website are you, what? All your client marketing reoccurring things are in this website over here called Salesforce. And the intern goes, what the hell is Salesforce? So it's organizational deficiencies. But, the other thing again, can't help myself for an enterprise prediction, the AI agents are going to show up in the Fortune 500 help desks. And, the things that we see a lot right now, sort of some of the banter we were talking about beforehand of, oh, well, here's a bunch of things you can do. Here's the help. Here's the article and the steps you should take. I think AI agents in the near future, next 6 months, will be able to take actions that, hey, you're working with something. Okay, I've canceled that reservation for you and booked you the new one. You should get a confirmation email shortly. Yeah. I hope that airlines get this, but that's going to open some very interesting things for when like a flight is canceled and then you've got 150 people all trying to get back to Boston all at once. Hopefully those poor Delta people, don't get shouted at, but I also wonder how it's going to organize data to choose like, all right, this person goes and this person goes. Do you do it by like rewards program? That'd be really interesting. And then I also think you're going to see the rise of more AI powered wearables. So I know Meta released the Ray-Ban wearables for its AI. I mean, Google tried Google Glass, and then there was the Humane Pin, which had a bunch of other problems, but wouldn't be surprised that stuff starts, that becomes, for lack of a better term, almost like a floating assistant through some type of wearable and power source. So it might be an AI running a cell phone device that then feeds to a Wi-Fi to another device so that the brick holds the power and runs the computation. And then whatever the other thing is just sensors. So, sensors and output. So it'll be interesting. I also don't foresee the smartphone going away, but it might become, you interact less with the screen and more with the wearable. So AI buzz continues for SMBs, improved productivity. Again, this is like assigning an intern to every person that you have. And especially if you work with worksheets, spreadsheets for an Excel and stuff, it can script and automate a lot of pieces. And you need to know just enough about whether the scripts that it's gave you are real. But I've been shocked with how easy of a prompt it is to be able to, hey, find all the information that has this type of name, and it just rips right through. Yeah, enhance customer engagement through personalization. Again, it's going to be able to, when data is fed into it, people are going to get information out of it faster. And that's more just a question of how things are organized. So for starting small, you can do simple tasks like scheduling. If you're in the 365 suite and you use Microsoft Bookings, Copilot can do a couple things for helping you do that. I use it extensively for data analysis. I have, export financial information from QuickBooks, and as long as the data is fed into QuickBooks correctly, it rifles right through it for, hey, what's the margin on the following client? What's this? What's that? But, things you can do right now is definitely in starting small, is just making sure you're entering data, answering the who, what, where, when, and why. Invest in the training and staff, show them the tool, maybe listen to a couple parts where, hey, this takes me a little while. And, maybe there's a way that kind of is that thinking of like, I would pick up the phone to call the resort versus I would, go to the resort's webpage. Where can that jump be made? And then two, just, watch the spread, watch the cost spread. You don't want to just pay for a bunch of Copilot licenses and then nobody uses it. So just keep an eye on that. And then the silver wave, the IT professionals are retiring. I know my father retired 2 years ago, and I think that the wave of people who had come in when it first kicked off are going to start exiting the workforce. And then the difficulty is going to be finding those IT generalists to replace them. I know the tech world had a lot of layoffs, but it's very different of you work as a project manager at Fortune 500 tech company versus helping a local accounting firm set up their Microsoft 365. There might be a lot of people who were just an IT guy. They had the one IT guy, and now he's 60 something and he hits 65, and now there's Social Security, and it's been a brutal run and stuff keeps getting more complicated, and they just opt out of the workforce. So I mean, there could be some real problems waiting for companies that are relying on just a guy, even internally. Even internally, if you've had just one person doing IT and, oh, yeah, no, he'll work here forever. No, he won't. And if things are complicated and he's the only one, there's a lot of knowledge in that guy's head or girl's head to get out. How are things set up? What are the edge cases and edge cases in IT matter. They are the ones that when stuff goes really wrong, it turns out there are 3 arcane settings that you have to change in order to get this thing to work again. So making sure that you're covered on that, hey, who's the next person that handles this is important. And I know other industries running into this too. I'm picking on accountants, but the accounting industry also has the same problem that a lot of the people, there's not a lot of new CPAs coming into the field, not a lot of younger people. So it's going to have serious consequences for how a lot of people handle IT, especially as things just keep getting more complicated. Is that some of it too, especially for those one-man bands, is it's just they get overwhelmed. They're trying to handle so many things at once. They need help, and their answer to it is, I'm just going to leave, which I don't blame them. And the other piece too is, even people who run MSPs, they might be reaching retirement age as well. They might have started a company like this, and depending on their management style, they might have been doing too much of the work, not training their workforce and learning, hey, here's how you do weird edge case 101. Here's how to do that. Maybe most of the time they just said, I'll just do that. It's easier. And then you transition for the SMB company that uses either the one-man band or those provider who's retiring out. They could go either way. They could sell the company and produce a drop in service level. They sell to one of the consolidations, and I kind of have that in the next slide. And then, you go from a small team that was all focused to now they're owned by a corporate, and now who they really care about isn't as much the client, but more servicing the company. And then if it was a one-man band and it was spotty documentation and some suspect design principles, when that turns over and something goes wrong, the company might come to a shrieking halt because, hey, this guy set up this program and now he's not here. And this program was our main line of business application. And now it has this weird error and nobody knows how to fix it. And, just really thinking about single point of failure pieces comes to this. And then there's also too, even if they don't sell the company, if there's spotty documentation, if it's a family business and it turns over, this is independent of IT, but hey, does the person who's coming in, are they going to be competent and smart enough to be able to keep the ship going? I'm glad that my father had at least gave me a nice long runway to get trained up and everything, but I've heard not every family business, survives the transition. So the transitions are coming for IT professionals. Excuse me. So for SMBs, it's going to get harder and harder to find experienced, qualified IT help. It's going to be in the MSPs, and then when you are in the MSPs, it's going to be, it's going to be making sure you get one that is truly local, that is actually around you, and isn't a giant, national firm that you're just an account number. You're not really people. Other MSPs might have staffing challenges because the guy who knew everything is gone. So now it's a lot of people who are figuring it out to a certain degree. And then because there's a supply demand crunch, up go the prices. So what can you do now? Make sure the IT provider you have is reliable. Broach the question about succession plans and even if it is a young person, just for any key vendor like that, say, hey, you pull out of the parking lot and the bus crushes you. What happens? What is your succession plan, IT provider? Who handles this? And if the answer is I'll just find another one, just be like, all right, when that happens, this is going to be an 8 on the pain scale, and I just kind of know it's happening. If you are using internal or you have just the one-man band, consider a managed service provider. And again, vet them. The idea with MSPs is that it's supposed to be a team, next man up, do things quickly. And that they run as a business, and the service they understand is the piece that changes over. But also keep an eye that they're actually local. There's no conglomerate that owns them and is actually telling them what to do. And then just documentation. I mean, this is similar to any type of estate planning, anything like that. Just make sure the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and not one person holds all the keys to the kingdom, that all the passwords are in one person's head. 2 is 1 and 1 is none. So on that same vein is the MSP consolidation. So I mentioned MSP, I mentioned the national ones, but one of the ways out for selling is they might not necessarily sell to a regional one, they might sell to one of the big ones. And this is kind of the illusion of choice, that SMBs have technically fewer options and the service becomes less personalized, more commoditized. And while, hey, large firms can offer a lot more, hey, we got a national footprint. If you have offices in Chicago, Boston, and Atlanta, we can put people on site in all 3 of those, and it's the same phone number that you're calling. But again, because of the large scale, you're a drop in the bucket. You're now dealing with a bureaucracy. Hey, I have a question about my bill, and you get passed through 4 people because you call the tech support line. Tech support line doesn't handle it. Oh, that's the sales line. Sales line. Oh, this is sales headquarters. You need to talk to regional headquarters. Oh, regional headquarters. All right, your account manager is this person here. This person here will call you. Okay, and you call them. They're on vacation, and nobody ever gets back to you. I am picking on having to deal with one of these large MSPs recently that there's a lot of crap that you just get passed around through. You're not really going straight to the service desk to get stuff fixed, and God help you if your account has problems. The other thing too is private equity firms are buying MSPs, that it might not necessarily be that an MSP, gets consolidated into a larger umbrella, but it could be that the firm itself sells to a private equity firm, and now it's no longer privately held. Now there are people who need returns, and investors need returns. Really difficult to be client focused at all times when technically the return to shareholders is more important. So that opens difficulties. And you're seeing this in a lot of MSPs with a push towards a multi-year contract. Monthly recurring revenue really makes this industry attractive to private equity. And also, we're not the only SMB space that's getting bought by them. I know, surprise, surprise, accountants as well are getting consolidated, and even insurance brokerage shops. So it's continuing. And then if it provides so much profit and things get locked in and all these things run on, somebody signs a contract for this much and it's 20% profitable and blah, 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 why would anyone ever sell to a private equity? Well, operators get burnt out. Some guy just says, this is too much. I'm just doing incident response ad nauseum for way too long. I need out. I mean, look at most IT firm operators. They usually have giant saddlebags under their eyes. So they might sell because they're looking for a way out. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. So for impacts on SMBs, you could lose a close relationship with an IT provider. They sell, the owner transitions out over whatever the term of his buyout agreement is, you could get access to more comprehensive services from larger MSPs. There could be a lot more there. Hey, if they can bring 20 people to the table to solve your problem, and this guy just does network security and this guy just does server configuration, sure, there's a lot more resources, but with more resources comes more back and forth bureaucracy and other fun things, but costs will go up.
It's like they might have those specialists, but those specialists are also servicing like 400 other clients across the country.
Yep. And now you're playing the game of who's the squeakiest wheel. And then prices going up, competition being reduced for, hey, there's not as many players in the game anymore, although there's still tons and tons of MSPs. The other piece too is, again, to the point of there are shareholders, there are investors, they have to get paid. You can only cut costs so much. So what's the other thing you do is raise prices, and software vendors and the other vendors are raising prices. So I think price increases going forward for a lot of people you're going to keep seeing it happen. So what people can do now is evaluate the contracts you have, look at the agreements you have. Are the service agreements meeting your needs? And what does it take to get out of them? Are you getting locked into long-term agreements? For a peek behind the curtain for MSPs and why they have multi-year agreements, some of it is because our vendors upstream say that, hey, you're signing up for the service for 3 years, and you go, and the reason for them is because they have investors too, and they have shareholders to appease or something. So some of it is just aligning the seasonality in the terms to whatever the upstream providers are. Some of them are. I've also heard the argument for a lot of MSPs that say, hey, it's a defense that you're working with a client, you invest a lot in the setup, and you're getting your return on investment for the time that you put in getting them set up over 3 years of working with them. And if your client decides to sell midstream, you have the ability to get paid out on what you need. But I would also say, in evaluating what firms to use, prioritize MSPs with tailored support over the one size fits all. You should be able to you should be able to drive to the local office, say hello. You should be able to meet your MSP person for coffee. I mean, this is a close relationship at the same level that you have with your accountant or that you have with your attorneys, that they're handling sensitive stuff, the thing that allows you to do your job. So pick the one that's going to tailor it to you and do what's best for you. And then especially too, just the same for attorneys and accountants, build enough of a basic understanding of IT operations that you know enough to be dangerous type deal, that what some of these words means, what some best practice is. I mean, I think of it in being a business owner that, I'm not a CPA, not a financial professional, but I can read a balance sheet. And I can look at a profit and loss statement and notice if something jumps out at me that doesn't answer a question. And the legal world, I look at a contract and I can read it and say, that sounds like I signed away all my rights to be able to sue someone. And that there's enough that raises the hairs in the back of your neck that says, go send this to the attorney and say, instead of saying, hey, look at this whole thing, say, I don't like this. How does this affect what I have going on? And knowing when you bump into, it's, again, in the legal world, like knowing when you bump into something that's like, there might be some legal consequences here. So do the same for IT, the same you do for financial, the same you do for legal. IT is now in that same realm because of how important, ubiquitous, and everyday it is. All right. So I was going to joke and say, hey, Google, set a reminder, see if my phone lights up, which it doesn't. Excellent. So in December 2025, let's see which ones we got right and which ones we got wrong. So we'll try and do this each year for, hey, chop these webinars up into the first half of like, how did I score? And then here's the new ones. It'll be a fun thing for going forward. If you have any predictions, we'd love to hear them. And even the joke ones, like more people quit the workforce to become goat farmers. I'm totally down for that one. It's especially as life gets more complicated. It also makes me really laugh about, Thoreau's Walden, that he talked about the hustle and bustle of daily life in 1860, whatever. And I've been like, oh, Sonny, it gets much, much worse.
Yeah.
And then if anybody's concerned that, hey, for some of these, I need a little bit of help, you can absolutely get in touch with us, systemsupport.com today, and fill out one of the contact forms. We're more than happy to help you out. But that's some of the predictions. Tried to keep it SMB, couldn't help myself, dipped it into a few enterprise ones, but 2025 will be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
And does anyone have any questions in the chat? Doesn't look like, but thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for giving us this view of the year to come, Will. And hope you all tune in next year. We'll see how wrong everyone was.
Nobody bats 1,000,
No.
but let's see if I can at least go 50-50.
all I know is I double checked because YouTube gives some users the ability to like edit and replace clips, and we have 5 YouTube subscribers, so they don't let us do that.
So it goes. Well, awesome, everyone. Have a wonderful day.